That is how you do an epic crossover. Hey guys, it's Kevin again, and I am so happy that I can finally review this to you guys all week long, well, for like 2 days, and pretty much since The Flash started. This is the episode I've been waiting to review to you guys. I think we've all really been hyping this up, and this is going to be my review for The Flash Season 1, Episode 8, Flash vs. Arrow. And I was so pumped for this episode. Literally, I was so pumped for it. I couldn't wait to see what was going to happen in this episode. It looked like it was going to be very, very epic. I couldn't wait to see it. And, one of the things people have been, I know everyone was really looking forward to it, and some people were complaining that they didn't really think this episode was going to work, that they felt it was forced. But here's my thing. It made sense for me because, of course, Barry started on Arrow, so it only made sense, and especially when they brought Felicity on, it only made sense for them to do this kind of crossover. And when they announced it, I was, like, so hyped for it. And how was this episode? Fucking amazing. This episode was perfect. Nothing wrong with it at all. Even the stuff and that wasn't with Arrow was perfect, and I think really the Flash got even more amazing in this episode. They introduced a very cool storyline that I definitely really enjoyed, and let's just get this episode because I loved it. I thought it was awesome. It actually had some very good Arrow moments as well. It had some stuff that I think is going to definitely affect Arrow that I'm definitely looking forward to, and I can't wait for part 2. I'm going to say it right now. I cannot wait for part 2. It's going to be epic. Let's just get to this episode. So, the way the episode started was pretty much what people said it was going to start. Now, I heard this before in their review, that basically it started like a regular episode of The Flash. Barry's speeding through Central City. He's basically doing all these good deeds for strangers. He's bringing them flowers to an older couple. He's painting a wall. And he's talking about the days when people have major feelings. As he finally ends up looking at Iris as she works. And he says that he sees her smile. That cannot be science. And I like that line definitely because it shows that he is really starting to get more interested in Iris. We've seen this develop more ever since, like, I believe it was episode 5 that they started to develop this more, and we can see that he definitely has a big interest in Iris, and I really like that scene, definitely. But then we get to the really awesome stuff, because a man enters a bank. When a security guard talks to him, the man's eyes glow red, then the guard's eyes glow red as well. The man makes his way back to the vault, making other customers and bank employees' eyes go red along the way. The man steals from the vault as chaos erupts in the bank, and everyone suddenly begins to just brawl, like a full-on brawl. When I'm saying brawl, like a full-on brawl, it was just epic what was going on there. So Cisco contacts Barry and sends him to the bank. And the woman in the bank gets hold of the gun. She aims it at a man and pulls the trigger, but the Flash saves him just in time, and everyone snaps out of their rages. So, Eddie and Iris lay in bed together. That was sort of surprising. I didn't think they were going to, like, have sex or anything, but that was surprising. And they're about to have sex, but Eddie suddenly mentions her father killing the mood. And, that's really weird that he's mentioning her father. And definitely I feel like this episode is kind of the first episode where we start to feel very sketchy about Eddie. Just this whole episode, I'm feeling very sketchy about him. And there's certain reasons why. Now, Iris is checking her blog and is happy that someone has just sent her a new picture of the Flash. Eddie thinks that it's photoshopped, and Iris doesn't understand why Eddie won't believe her, and Eddie says that he believes in what he can see and hear and touch, and he believes in her. So, I thought that definitely was a interesting line. So, Barry meets Joe at the bank, and Joe says that there's a tracer in the stolen money, so they should be able to find the robber soon. And Eddie walks by with the girl who fired the gun. She's very upset and insisting that she would never do such a thing and doesn't know what came over her. By the way, guys, one other thing I do want to say, there's no development with the Wells storyline, with what Wells is and what he's kind of, like, hiding. There's not really, we see, like, one scene with that, but I'm happy they didn't do that, because a lot of people are getting sick of that, and I'm happy that they did something different. I definitely enjoyed that. So, at the station, we see Captain Singe is in his office. He's sitting down to a burger and fries, and he explains to Eddie that his boyfriend is encouraging a healthy diet, so he can only eat what he wants at work. And Eddie discusses how he thinks the Flash is dangerous and wants to find him. And when they said that, I'm like, this is an amazing storyline, because I really love where the storyline is going. It's really starting to show Eddie's hatred for the Flash, which I don't know where this came from, and this definitely makes me think there's something going on with Eddie, because I have no idea where this came from. Like, Eddie didn't hate the Flash before. He didn't seem to have a problem with him. Why all of a sudden does he have a problem with him? Like, it doesn't really make sense if you think about it. Like, it sort of does, but, like, it doesn't. It really does not make sense. So, Singe is not convinced at all, and Joe, who is also there, does not back Eddie up on this. He thinks that he's just like, what are you talking about? So Barry watches this exchange from outside Singe's office when Iris walks up and asks what's happening. And Barry says that Eddie wants to get the Flash, and Iris thinks Eddie is jealous of the Flash, which he probably kind of is. And Eddie comes out of the office pretty disappointed, only to be confronted by Iris, and Barry speeds off to Star Lab, stealing Singe's unhealthy meal on the way. So, at Star, Wells is lecturing the group about anger, and I thought the scene was definitely very interesting. It's kind of foreshadowing something that happens a little bit later in the episode, but I like the way the show did that. Kind of like, you know, inference things and foreshadowing. And the show does a good job with foreshadowing, definitely, and I like that they do that. So Caitlin pulls up CAT scans of the bank victims, showing how the brains were affected, causing the rage explosions. And Barry sees that Iris has sent the Flash a message, and Caitlin encourages him not to get involved. So, basically, the Flash then meets up with Iris, who warns him about Eddie. You know, she warns him that Eddie's coming after him, and that he should be worried, and, you know, she didn't know if the Flash knew, so she wants him to know. And I thought that was good that she told him, and I really like seeing the Flash and Iris have this bonding. You know, it definitely is very well done. And Cisco then calls because the robber is then located with the tracer in the cache. The robber's at a storage facility, finds the tracer, removes his sunglasses, and Joe, Eddie, and a third cop find him. And this guy was actually pretty creepy, I gotta say. Like, the guy that played, the guy that played the robber, definitely very creative. I thought he was definitely very well done. But the robber flashes his red eyes at the third cop, who immediately turns his gun on Joe and Eddie. The Flash arrives as the cop shoots and pushes Eddie and Joe out of the way. And before the cop can shoot again, he's hit with an arrow, and we get one of the most badass intros I think I've seen in a crossover in a very long time. That's how Oliver arrives. He just shoots him with an arrow, and that was honestly badass. You know, just the way he's introduced really shows how awesome and badass Oliver really is. It was awesome the way they introduced him. So, then basically, we finally have the Arrow part, and I was happy that the show kind of took a little, they didn't start right away with seeing Oliver. That would have been, anticlimactic if it would have started that way. So I'm happy that it took a little bit of time for the Arrow team to actually show up, because that's what we were looking forward to the most. Let's face it. I mean, we were looking forward to seeing, of course, what was going on in The Flash, but it's just another case, and that gets boring after a while. And what I like about this episode is we barely focus on the case. The case is, like, barely focused on. There's really not a lot we find out about it, which I like, because it focuses more on the bonding between Barry and Oliver. So Felicity and Diggle are there. They wait for Oliver to show up, only for Barry to beat him up there, and Barry is surprised to learn that neither Oliver nor Felicity... I thought this was hilarious. Basically, we find out that neither Oliver nor Felicity told Diggle about super speed. The way that Diggle's reacting is hilarious. He's like, you have super speed? It's hilarious that that happened, because here's the thing that I loved, is that we don't really get to see a comedic side of Diggle. We see Diggle be the best friend to Oliver. We see him give him advice. We see Diggle... be a father. We don't really get to see a comedic side of him, and I thought this was great, that we actually saw a very comedic side of Diggle, and I actually would like to see more of this, because it worked very good here, and I definitely really enjoyed that. So, Oliver arrives and teases Barry good-naturedly, and Team Arrow has come to Central City looking for clues, because, of course, at the end of the last episode of Arrow, Captain Boomerang showed up, so they're still trying to figure out clues about Captain Boomerang. So Barry suggests that they team up and work together on that, plus the robber case. You know, he wants them to work on both cases together. And Oliver at first turns him down. He doesn't think this is a good idea. Now, it does make sense why he thinks that's a bad idea, because they are very different in the way they work. You know, Oliver thinks about things. Barry doesn't really think about things, really. And Felicity argues on Barry's behalf. And I like that they did that. It's showing... This episode has tons of chemistry between Felicity and Barry. She offers to go to Star Labs, and Barry picks her up and runs, and Diggle's still freaking out. It's hilarious to watch. And then we get probably one of the funniest scenes in the episode. This was just really, really good comedy. And that's one of the things I love about this episode. Is while it was so epic and such a dark episode, it dealt with comedy very, very well. It knew when to be funny. And I definitely really enjoyed that. And I hope that they continue to do that in Arrow. I know that Arrow's a darker show, but Arrow handles humor very, very well. And The Flash does it too. So I definitely really enjoy that. So Barry and Felicity arrive. She realizes her shirt's on fire. She rips it off. And she's just standing there in her bra. And Kayla and Cisco come out, and I love Felicity's line. She's like, I am very happy I decided not to go braless. That was hilarious. And then Cisco's like, that's something I'm never going to be able to see. I'm never going to forget. I thought that was hilarious. Cisco is just, oh my god, so funny in this episode. So many funny lines from Cisco. Stealing the show, okay? I'm going to say right now, Cisco is stealing the show right now. He really is. So, Caitlin gives Felicity a Star Labs shirt, and she's dressed again, and she asks her why she's there, and she thinks that it's because of Barry, and Felicity says no, they basically, crossed that bridge, it's not gonna happen, and Felicity shows them the boomerang, and Cisco immediately starts to geek out over it, and he and Felicity head off to run some tests, and Caitlin catches Barry on their investigation. The police officer was affected, remembers seeing the color red before he became enraged, and Caitlin suspects the color being exposed to the optic nerve is causing the rages. So she also tells Barry that Wells wants to see him. Now, this, of course, is very concerning because what is Barry's costume? Red. So, basically, if he sees the color red, he might end up becoming enraged. So she's kind of worried about him because of that. So Barry jokes that he feels like he's being sent to the principal's office, and he goes to see Wells and finds Joe there too. And I like seeing this. I like seeing that Joe and Wells are suspicious of the arrow, and it makes sense why. And one of the things I like that people are showing is that a lot of people said that, and I thought this was interesting that Stephen Amell said this. He said in an interview that Batman inspired him, and that's why Arrow is so much like Bruce Wayne, and that's why his story is so much like Batman, because Batman inspired him. And one of the things I love here is that this is very much like Batman. They are against Arrow because he's a vigilante, and Barry defends his friend and fellow hero. He says, he's done good things, he's a good guy, he's a hero, but of course, Oliver doesn't think of himself as a hero, because he said straight up to Barry in the first episode, I'm a vigilante, you're a hero. He said that to him. So they're then interrupted by this hilarious scene of boomerangs flying around crazy, and we find out it's just Cisco's fault. I love the fact that Cisco is just like, oh, sorry, it's my fault. I thought that was great, and, Joe is not deterred. He wants the arrow to go. He does not want Barry to work with the arrow, but they have to. They have to make this work somehow. So Arrow returns to the storage facility, and Diggle discusses Barry's abilities over the headshot. And Arrow finds a man working and demands to have. And I thought this was hilarious. He's wondering if he has to go if he also goes to the bathroom at super speed. Like, just the questions he was asking Oliver, and the fact that Oliver's like, I don't care right now. We got to do this. I thought that was definitely very funny. So, Oliver finds a man working and demands to have the name of the person who rented the unit where the robber was. So then at Jitters, Oliver tells Barry that the robber's name is Roy G. Bivolo. And Iris serves Oliver and Felicity coffees, and I love that she is flirting with Oliver. I love this part. It was definitely very, very funny. And I love the fact that she told Barry that Oliver is on her list of 3 famous people she would cheat on with Eddie. I think that's hilarious. I would have never suspected that, but I love it. I love that Iris is flirting with Oliver. Love that. That's great stuff there. Hilarious scene. So, basically, she smacks Barry for knowing Oliver, not telling her. She obviously really wants to meet Oliver. It was really funny to watch, and it's hard to remember this, but, of course, we have to remember that Oliver's a celebrity. Barry's not a celebrity, but Oliver is basically a celebrity. So, Iris is, freaking out by this, and I think that's just so, so funny the way they did that. Such a funny scene. So Oliver and Felicity continue discussing the pros and cons of teaming up with Barry, and of course, Oliver's kind of hesitant about teaming up with Barry, kind of because he knows that Barry has feelings for Felicity, but Felicity's telling him that Barry worked very well with him because, of course, Barry can run so fast, the super speed will work and things like that. And Oliver, basically tells Barry he refuses, and I love that basically we see that this scene worked very well because it shows the difference between Barry and Oliver. Barry's much more laid back and sort of more of a fun guy, while Oliver's very mature about things. And Barry wants to call this guy a metahuman, but Oliver's like, I am not calling him that. But he agrees to call Barry partners, and they shake on it. And they then meet, Barry then meets Oliver in a secluded area outside town. And Oliver's mad that Barry manages to be late, even with super speed, and Oliver wants to train Barry. And I love Barry's line. He's like, wait, what, Rocky? I thought that was great. And basically, he learns to stop running in blind, and Oliver tells Barry that he's going to use his bow to shoot him, but Barry doesn't believe it, but agrees to try the exercise. So, Barry runs back a distance, and then speeds towards Oliver, who shoots him with an arrow, and at first it doesn't work, he catches it, and then he's shot in the back by 2 more arrows, and Oliver's, rigged it earlier, so I thought that was definitely very funny. So Eddie's back in Captain Shinz's office, once more trying to authorize a task force to find the Flash, and Joe's angry that Oliver tortured the man at the storage facility to get information, but Barry points out they would not know Bivolo's name without Oliver's help, which is true. They wouldn't have known his name. That's more due in parts to Felicity, because, I would have said Felicity, but of course Oliver did this, Most times Felicity finds those kind of things, but this was different. Oliver found the name. So I do agree with what Barry's saying there, and I definitely really enjoy this storyline. So then we see Felicity and Caitlin bonding. I love seeing that. It was great to see that. I thought that it really did make sense because these are the two female leads of the show. Caitlin, well, Iris is the female lead of The Flash, but in terms of the nerdy ones, like the ones that are sort of like, I don't want to say nerdy, but geeky and things like that, Felicity and Caitlin, they're discussing how the right colors and the right sequence can reverse what Bivolo is doing. And when Wells enters, he has to speak to Felicity alone. And I did not know what was going to happen in this scene because, of course, Wells is a very suspicious character right now, so you can't really trust what he's saying. However, I thought this was interesting when he tells Felicity. He talks to Felicity about how the unknown is dangerous, and he wants to know the Arrow's identity. And Felicity says that it's not her secret to tell, and Wells responds that he will just have to find out on his own, but of course, he already knows this stuff. Keep in mind, he knows this stuff, and the thing is, and I actually forgot about this, that Wells, of course, knows something about Oliver, and he knows that in the future, there's an article that says Oliver loses his family fortune. So I was thinking that he's gonna tell him that. That's kind of what I think is gonna happen there. So he arrives to the lab, and Barry arrives to the lab, and he's fairly delusioned with Oliver after his training session, and he talks with Joe. And Cisco used the facial recognition software that Felicity gifted them to find Bivolo, but Barry refused to call Oliver to help, so that was interesting. So, the Flash finds Bivolo, pins him in the wall, Bivolo uses power in the Flash, and escapes. So, Barry's now infected. He's infected, he's gonna go crazy, and I love that they do that. It really, as I said, the whole thing with them talking about anger makes sense in the next scene. Because Caitlin checks Barry's eyes, and Barry seems pretty calm and collected, he seems fine, but then Caitlin scolds Barry for being reckless, to which, and I thought this was interesting, because what happens at the end of the episode, but also because we haven't heard about this. Barry says to her, I'm not Ronnie. You need to stop treating me like I am because I'm not. And Caitlin's hurt by this because this was her husband. She's obviously very affected by what's going on there and is very upset about that. So Felicity tells Barry that Oliver wants another training session, and Barry doesn't want that. He does not want to have another training session with Oliver. And he shows up and he tells Oliver he's never going to be as strong as he is. He'll never be what he is. And he accuses Oliver of kind of being jealous of him, which is kind of true. And what I like is that with this is that it basically what this does is it brings out the worst in people. It makes them full of anger, full of rage, and if they get full of rage, the anger gets to them. It makes them very violent, and I really like seeing them do that. I thought the storyline was very well executed. I thought it was very well done, in my opinion. And I definitely really enjoyed the way that was done. I thought that was very well done, in my opinion. I definitely really, really enjoyed that. I thought that was amazing. I definitely really love that. So I thought that was a great scene, and again, it really showed the whole thing with anger very, very well. So at the police station, this is when the episode just gets crazy, because Captain Singe is demanding results from Barry, and he snaps at the captain angrily for how he is treated. Joe quickly intervenes. He has no idea what's going on with Barry. He's just, like, snapping at the captain. So he's telling Singe that Barry's having an allergic reaction to medication, and, because Joe knows what's going on. And Joe scolds Barry, reminding him that Singe is his boss, and Barry accuses Joe of not believing him and demands Joe get his father out of prison. Because, of course, he wants that done. And what I like here is that this is kind of thinking, kind of what Barry's thinking is coming out of his mouth, which I thought was interesting. And I'm wondering if some of these storylines were actually going to get something, get to something. Now, we know that Joe is trying to figure out information about what's going on with his father. We know that because we saw that in episode 6. We saw that Joe's trying to do that, basically. So Barry sees Iris and Eddie leaving together and becomes further enraged because he does not like Eddie right now. He's shoving Joe back. Joe sees Barry's eyes turn red, which is not a good sign. So Joe goes to Star Labs to tell everyone what's wrong with Barry, and Cisco points out how helpful a cold gun would be in the situation, and Wells tells Felicity to call Oliver because they need his help, and everyone's stunned at this point. So Iris drives while Eddie clearly is in a mood, keeps changing radio stations, and I personally thought what this scene was trying to show is that Eddie and Iris are going to break up. They are going to break up at some point, and they don't break up in this episode, so I'm pretty sure that these two are going to break up, just because of the way they're writing them now, and the way they're kind of turning us against Eddie. really makes me think that these two are going to break up. I mean, Eddie is not really a good guy for her anymore. He wants to know how she knows the Flash is good, and she confesses being in contact with him. He's then pulled from the car, thrown to the street by the Flash. The Flash rages at Eddie, who tries to shoot him, and that was insane what happened there. So at Star Labs, Cisco babbles to Diggle, who's quite calmly glaring, and Felicity tracks the Flash, and the Flash continues to wail on Eddie. Iris talks to the Flash down, but it doesn't work, and suddenly Arrow arrives and shoots a cable around the Flash. He grabs the cable and drags Arrow away. And still at Star Labs, Caitlin and Cisco are arguing with Diggle over whether Barry or Oliver would win in a fight, and I think this is a great scene. Because they're talking about, who would win. And Felicity's like, please tell me we're not having this conversation. And she's watching the fight and everything. And this is what we were all hyped up for. Because if you remember, when they showed the preview, it was literally just the two of them fighting. That's really what it was. It was us hearing Barry saying those lines of like, oh, you'll never be better than me and things like that. And it kind of seemed like Barry was being a dick. And then we saw the two of them fighting. And I'm going to say this right now. While the fight was very short, it did not pay off. It definitely did pay off. It was an awesome fight. It was epic. This was just amazing. Just to see, and I know people are going to say the fight was too short. Just think about it. We got a fight between the Flash and Arrow. That's what's so epic about it, is the fact that we actually got a fight between them. I don't think what's epic about it is the fact that they fought, how epic the fight was. It was a very epic fight, but what's more epic is that these two actually fought. We actually saw a fight between the Flash and Arrow. You never think you'd see something like that, but we did. We saw that, and it's amazing that we saw that. Just the way that's done is just awesome. So the Flash stops running in an alley. Arrow shoots an explosive arrow into the building behind the Flash, who is thrown forward in the explosion. Arrow shoots the Flash with a horse tranquilizer, but does no good. The Flash encircles Arrow, running full out. Arrow escapes by shooting another arrow with a cable onto a building and rising above the Flash, who runs to the top of the building and pushes Arrow off. Another cable arrow saves his life, and they are back in the alley. They fight until Arrow tricks the Flash with what looks like a repeat of their training session, only to stab his leg, and he tells the Flash that he still believes in him, and as the Star Labs van shows up with Joe and Wells, Arrow holds the Flash while the side of the door of the van opens and a series of lights flash, curing Barry's rage, so Barry's okay now. So Cisco calls the fight a tie. I thought it was funny that they were actually trying to figure out who would win. I thought that was definitely very funny. So he's calling the fight a tie, and Barry apologizes, and Oliver suggests they go catch Bavolo, and they put Bavolo in the metahuman prison. Of course, they put him in that prison, and I love that Cisco's like, I love that Cisco's like freaking out about it. It was so funny. And Caitlin names him Rainbow Raider, but I love Cisco's thing that he says to her. He says to her basically, don't steal my thing. That's my thing. I name them. You don't get to do that. And I thought that was really funny. So, this was definitely very interesting. I definitely really enjoyed this next scene because it really shows something that I think is actually going to connect to, something that really connects to the Flash and Arrow that I'm interested in seeing if this is actually going to happen. So Oliver addresses Joe and the Star Labs people about keeping his secret. And Felicity thanks them all, and they start their goodbyes. And I thought this was interesting that that he said that to them, because I kind of feel like someone is going to betray him. Because, in my opinion, I think they should do a crossover of the Flash and Arrow every season. And if they do, I feel like the next one should be about that storyline. So Wells then tells Oliver that he met Robert Queen once, and during the conversation they talked about Oliver, and he thinks Robert would be proud of him. Now, I thought he was going to tell him straight out about the whole news article thing. However, if he would, Oliver would think he's crazy. So, he's going to tell him at some point, but he's going to have to explain himself, okay? We are not going to find out. He's not going to tell Oliver till we find out Wells' true intentions. That's really the gist of it all. So, which I think we're going to get in next week's episode, because Wells is not in the crossover. He's not. So, they leave Star Labs, and Oliver tells Felicity that something is off about Wells. He can tell that there's something that Wells is hiding, which I love, because it shows that Oliver can tell. And I love seeing that, because it definitely makes me think that we're going to get another crossover, like, mid-season. I could definitely see that happening. They want to do another crossover mid-season? Do it! I love this. I love seeing these two work together. It works perfectly. So Eddie tells Iris that he finally gets his task force, and Iris sticks with Eddie. And Oliver and Felicity see Barry watching Iris and Eddie. Barry sees them and apologizes for bottling his feelings, but before this, Oliver confronts him. And I like what he says. He says to him, "You can always talk to me," and he agrees to learn from Oliver, and he tells him, "Let Iris go." And I really like this line. He says, "Guys like us don't get the girl." And I agree what he's saying. Think about it. The beginning of the season, and it really connects to what's going on in Arrow, and I like that they did that, because I honestly thought that they were just gonna, it seemed like for a while, they were just gonna have the Arrow characters on there, but this was mainly going to be, this was basically going to be, what was going on with, the Flash. I thought that's what was going to happen here, and that Arrow would be in the background. But no, we actually get a legit storyline here. Especially something that happens at the end of the scene, which I definitely want to talk about, because it's huge. So, basically, he says that, of course, we thought that him and Felicity would be together, but he couldn't be, because he can't handle being both Oliver and Arrow. He said that to her. So, I really like that line, because it really connects to what's going on in Arrow right now with him and Felicity, and how Felicity has moved on to Ray Palmer. I definitely really enjoyed that. So, Oliver's about to leave, and a woman walks in, and it's the girl that Oliver got pregnant. If you remember, back in Seeing Red, we saw that storyline with that girl that Oliver got pregnant, and the second we saw her, I freaked out, because we didn't see this at the end of Season 2. We all thought we were going to see his son show up or something, but that doesn't happen. However, it's probably going to happen now, because she says that she heard about Moira's death and knows she loves Oliver very much, and they part, and Felicity asks who she was, and Oliver says someone he used to know, but she's on the phone with her child from where Oliver can hear. So my question is she going to ask him to be a father? Is she going to allow him to be a father to this child? Does she want him to father her son? Do you think that she has some sort of, agenda with that? I don't really know what she's trying to do, but I definitely feel this is going to be a major plot point in Arrow. Either way, this is going to be a major plot point. I don't know what this is trying to show. It definitely is showing that this is going to be a major plot point, and I love that twist, because they said that we would get the biggest reveal about Oliver Queen we've gotten so far, and that is by far one of the biggest twists of the entire episode. It's not the biggest twist, though, but of course, Barry does do what Oliver told him to do. He sends Iris a message and goes to meet her. She's furious after all defending him. He attacked Eddie, and Iris tells the Flash not to contact her anymore, and the Flash runs through the streets. So the relationship between Iris and the Flash is broken, and the relationship between Iris and Barry is good. But Iris and the Flash, not going to be good. But what I like about this is that, I think this is going to end Iris reporting about the red streak. I think this is going to end Iris reporting about the Flash. I think that's really the end of that storyline, because now she doesn't really care about the Flash. She doesn't give two shits about him, really. So why would she report about him if she is mad at him? Why would she do that? Makes sense. So then I love the way they end this episode, because I didn't think they were going to do this. We got that mention about Ronnie before, but I didn't think this was going to happen, because Caitlin looks at a picture of her and Ronnie. And two thugs see a homeless looking man. They go to rob him. They taunt the man, asking if he's shivering because he's cold or scared. The man rises and suddenly is covered in fire. And he's not cold, but we see that it's Ronnie, and he has become Firestorm. I cannot wait for part 2. I am so hyped for part 2, and that's how part 1 ends. But honestly, guys, this works as a standalone episode. I've heard people say it really does, because there's no cliffhanger that leads you into part 2, but there is going to be a part 2, because they still have to catch Captain Boomerang, of course. So we'll have to see what happens with that. That's going to be interesting to watch. But this episode, oh my god, guys, this is how you do a crossover. Best crossover of the year by far. Best crossover of the entire year. Yes, this was better than, obviously this was better than Simpsons Guy. I mean, this crossover did what a good crossover should do. It connected the characters very well. Let's talk about what it did, some of the things I really liked. Oliver and Barry, Grant Gustin, and Stephen Amell work amazing together. Yes, they hate each other. Yes, they don't really get along very well, but they work perfectly together, and it really shows that, there's a reason why Barry, started an Arrow, because he works so well with Stephen Amell. That's why. Remember how awesome it was? And it's hard to believe that a year from now, that is when this happens. If you remember, a year ago, Barry was introduced on Arrow, so it was literally a year ago, and I forgot this happened, but I think it's awesome that a year later they're doing this crossover. I think that's awesome, and just the way they're doing that is just really, really well done, And the way they did this whole crossover was great. I loved seeing the friendship between Caitlyn and Felicity. I thought that was great. I loved seeing Cisco and Diggle comedy. I thought the comedy was very good in this episode. Definitely, because the show, it could have been a very, very dark episode and just had, like, really dark moments, but it didn't, because the episode needed to have some sort of funny moments, and I like that the episode realized that, you know what, we don't need to be completely serious all the time. We can have some fun with this episode, and I like that they realized that, because it worked well, in my opinion. It worked well that they had funny moments, and I definitely really enjoyed that. And everything in this episode was extremely amazing. Everything was very well constructed. I love pretty much everything about this episode. Let me know what's going to happen with Oliver now. Let's talk about Oliver and that girl. Is she going to ask him to be a father to her child? Is that sort of the agenda she has? Does she want him back in her life? You know, are they possibly going to start a relationship again? I don't want that to happen, but this is going to be cool, because I think it's cool that we're seeing this girl showing back after Oliver told Barry, let Iris go. Is Barry done pursuing Iris? Is Iris done writing about the streak? What's going to happen there? Do you think that Iris and Eddie are going to break up? I could definitely see it happening. If they break up, we'll have to see what happens. Now that Ronnie is Firestorm, is he good or bad? We don't know. We don't know if he's good or bad yet. I don't know if he's going to join Team Arrow. I don't know if he's just a metahuman that needs help. I don't know if he's, if he's sort of like Girder. I don't know. We'll have to see what happens there. But Caitlyn is going to be shocked when she sees this happening. Caitlyn has no idea what's going to happen. Caitlyn has no idea this is happening, so she's going to freak out when this happens. It's going to be very interesting to see what ends up happening there. And that's basically for my review, guys. Overall, guys, I loved this episode. Oh my god, this is how you write an episode of The Flash and Arrow, and this is how you do a crossover. And I can't wait for part 2. Let me know what you guys saw this episode. I know this was a late review, but I had something to do when the episode was originally aired. My next review will definitely be for the mid-season finale of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which I'm definitely looking forward to. I'm going to watch it right now, and I will see you guys for that review. Okay, bye. Oh, also, let me know what you guys saw this crossover. Did it work for you? Did it feel forced? Did you like the way it connected it together? Are you looking forward to part 2? And I'll see you guys in my next video. Okay, bye.